According to prosecutors, this man poses a threat to public safety that his county in Wisconsin hasn't seen in years. He and his girlfriend allegedly tried to kill 2 women he used to date, and the way they allegedly tried to do it is shocking. Complicated, poisonous cocktails.
When Paul broke into my car and tried to poison me on May 15th, the fear became real.
One of his alleged victims spoke in court. We also have the newly released evidence pictures of the alleged kill kit of poisons investigators say was used in this case. But for as smart as this couple allegedly thought they were, just wait until you see the mistakes they made that led police in their direction. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We sadly cover a lot of cases where people are accused of trying to kill those who they used to be in relationships with. But this story that we're following out of Wisconsin is different for a lot of reasons. And one of the big reasons is that a couple tried to use, allegedly, very complicated, poisonous cocktails. Before I get into the surprising defense also that Paul Van Duyne may be going for in this case, let's begin with who he was and who he dated. His co-suspect, Paul Van Duyne and Andrea Whitaker, are both facing multiple counts of first-degree attempted murder for allegedly using chemicals like cyanide to take out 2 of Paul's exes. Now, I'll also explain why one of the victims says calling Paul a former boyfriend or even an ex is a huge stretch, and that really does make this case even more bizarre. Paul and Andrea live in Madison, Wisconsin. Paul is a mechanical engineer and Andrea is a pharmacy student. Very interesting background considering the story that we are talking about today. Here's a pic of the 2 of them together from Facebook. Now, court records say that Paul met Andrea online and he calls her Annie, and he thought Annie was the one. His Facebook even reads, "Father of 2 boys, he is divorced, very in love with Annie." She isn't the mom of his 2 kids, by the way. Now, this story, according to police, begins on May 12th for them because they responded to a possible poisoning at St. Mary's Hospital in Rock County, Wisconsin. A woman showed up at the hospital. She had severe abdominal pain, and it had just been getting worse over the past week. Doctors found that she had a large amount of thallium in her system. That is a chemical that was once used in rat poison, but has been outlawed in the United States because it's so toxic. The doctor said, quote, "The only way a human could have this amount of thallium in her system is if they were intentionally consuming it." Now the question becomes, not only how does she get that chemical in her system, but who would want her to have that chemical in her system? And at this point, according to police, she didn't have the faintest idea, but she did start talking about some very bizarre events that had happened to her over the last month. She says on April 25th, she went to the gym. There's a water bottle that she always uses to drink out of when she goes to the gym, and she used it on the 25th. Nothing was wrong. But then she left it in her car, and then she comes back on the 26th to go to the gym, and she says when she took a gulp of that same water bottle, it reportedly tasted, quote, rancid. She got sick, she threw up, and at the gym, she even joked about potentially being poisoned. It was just that bad. She then says she drove to Chicago and she found a 16-ounce clear plastic water bottle in her car. She says that bottle had a rancid smell. She had no idea where it came from, so she just threw it away. Detectives later tested her gym water bottle and they found thallium, iron, and cyanide, which is a known chemical that is used in poison. If you've ever seen the movie The Tylenol Murders, it was recently on Netflix. This is what we're talking about because cyanide was added to bottles of extra strength Tylenol back in the 80s. That case is still open today. The point I'm trying to make is that this is very dangerous stuff. Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, I want to talk about something important for so many families, and that is finding quality food, but not having to break the bank for it. And that's where Thrive Market comes in. Thrive Market is an online grocery store. It's really the go-to for me, where you can shop healthy and sustainable products, and they all get delivered right to your door. One of the best parts about it is Thrive does all the heavy lifting when it comes to restricting more than 1,000 questionable ingredients from all of the products that they carry. Take a look at these sweet potato chips. These are great for getting through the cravings in the middle of the day. They're dairy-free. It's great if you're on paleo, maybe you're vegan. These chips are a go-to here. Come with a little sea salt on them. They are great for getting through those midday cravings. With Thrive Market, you can shop everything from a pantry staple and a snack to personal care items, all from the comfort of your own home. And they're committed to sustainability. So not only are you taking care of yourself, your family, but the planet as well. And they have an easy to use website and app. That way you can filter by your dietary preferences. Maybe you're keto. I was talking about paleo a moment before. Maybe you're looking for something gluten-free, vegan, or just trying something healthier and swapping out some of the stuff that you typically have been using. Thrive Market really has something for everybody. So if you're ready to make healthy food shopping as easy as just a few clicks, you can scan this QR code on your screen. Or how about this? Go to thrivemarket.com/onthecase. You will get 30% off your first order and a free gift when you join Thrive. Give them a try. Now, a little more than a week after she had that incident with the water bottles, this same woman says she took her younger sister to the movies and they were in the car and they noticed a smell. So they took the car to the dealership and the smell was so bad that the technician working on the car said that he had to stick his head out of the window just to drive it around the lot. They later found a plastic tote in the rear of the car, according to police. The woman said she had no idea where that tote came from. Police say inside the tote was hydrogen sulfide. That is a gas that can be fatal. And we're not done. On May 8th, this woman's stepdad found a brown, sandy substance inside the vents of her car. And the stepdad, smart move here, actually kept a sample of it. Later, it was determined to be abrin. That is an extremely toxic plant protein. So who would allegedly be planting all of these poisons around this woman? Now, you know where this story is going, but how about this? She's not the only alleged victim. On May 15th, after the first victim was in the hospital in Rock County, Wisconsin, there's a woman in nearby Dane County, Wisconsin, which is roughly an hour away, who allegedly had someone break into her car while she was shopping at Costco. Now, someone saw a man break into the car. He was rummaging through the vehicle, they said. The woman who owned the car came out after the person got away, and she told police she didn't see anything was stolen, but then she took a sip of her water bottle. Quote, she had taken a sip from her water bottle, which was in her car when it was broken into. She told the officer that the water tasted, quote, awful, and that her mouth felt funny. 5 days later, we're back at Costco, and the same woman is inside shopping, and she reported that her car was broken into again while she was inside. Now, a witness said they saw the whole thing, that a suspect wedged something like a blood pressure cuff into the front door of the vehicle, then used a long metal rod to reach inside, but this suspect once again got away. Police say the water that woman drank contained cyanide and thallium. You can see the comparisons between these two cases. Not only are there alleged links to the types of poisons that police say they are finding in these two cases, there's also a very important link between these two women, and it is one man who they both dated. Or let's just say went on dates with. They didn't go on a lot of dates to be able to actually put a label on it. And you'll hear what one of the women said in court about that. Now, the woman who was allegedly poisoned at Costco said she just went on a few dates over a year ago with Paul Van Duyne, but she ended the relationship because she wasn't interested in him and she hadn't heard from him lately, so he wasn't really someone who was top of mind. Now, in the case of the other woman, the woman who had to go to the hospital, at first, she told police she couldn't really think of anybody who would want her dead or poisoned, but then she thought of Paul Van Duyne. She told police that she met Paul 2 years ago on a dating app. They had a bit of a relationship. It was casual and sexual, she called it, but it wasn't romantic. And she actually said the relationship ended because Paul met Andrea Whitaker online and he called her the one. But then she says, after not hearing from Paul for some time, he texted her this year saying that she was evil and that Annie, Andrea Whitaker, had taken her own life because Whitaker had learned that he had dated the woman. He also said that he would never forgive her and that she would rot in hell. Police arrested Paul on May 22nd, a week after his final alleged poisoning attempt for that alleged break-in at Costco, but he refused to provide DNA, so he was released. And apparently, according to court records, he wasn't done again. On June 15th, police say they were following his van and they saw it driving in the direction of the woman who had to go to the hospital after he allegedly poisoned her. Police say Outside of her house, after he left, they located a trail camera. It's kind of like a GoPro that you would put on a tree. And police say they took the footage from the camera, and the footage shows Paul adjusting that camera, and he's wearing a hoodie and surgical gloves. At that point, police had everything they needed to put Paul Van Duyne under arrest. He was booked into the Dane County Jail. And now, if you follow true crime, and if you're watching us, you certainly do, you know that calls from jail are recorded, and police are listening, and they know how to figure out code words. Police say while in jail, Paul made a call to Andrea Whitaker, and he asked her to take care of his cats. And this is how that call reportedly went. We got a transcript of one of these phone calls. Paul goes, quote, "So did you take care of the cats? You get their stuff in the laundry room too." And Andrea replies, yes. Paul then goes on to say, "Can you check Google Home, and that will have any alerts of movement at the door? And if no one's been there, I have some cat medicine on the top shelf in the refrigerator that should really be disposed of." End quote. Now, when he's saying cat medicine, I think you probably know what he may be actually talking about, according to police, because police say as they were preparing a search warrant for Paul's home, they see Andrea show up at the house. Paul allegedly called her again and asked her to take his laptop with her. Police say they saw Andrea leave the house with a laptop and a garbage bag, and in the bag was allegedly a vial of a cloudy liquid that she claims was cat medicine. Police then executed search warrants and found evidence that seems to build a very strong case. Look at this picture. This is of what police call a kill kit. This was allegedly found in Paul's car. And in that bag, that has Paul's name on it, by the way, FBI agents found 5 vials, an inhaler, and a water bottle, just like the one in the woman's car who was allegedly poisoned outside her gym. Not to mention a bag of rosary peas, which generates the abrin poison police say they found in both women's cars. On top of that, police searched Whitaker's phone, and her search history allegedly included not just internet searches of the women, both of them, that the couple allegedly poisoned, but there were dozens of searches related to the chemicals that the couple allegedly used to try and kill those women. Then you have the text messages between Paul and Andrea that allegedly lay out their crimes. And you can see in this exchange, they're literally going back and forth about the way that they make ingredients to build these poisonous cocktails. Originally, Whitaker was only charged with aiding Paul in his alleged scheme, but then her charges were upgraded to attempted murder based off what they found in that search history. Paul made his first court appearance in Dane County, Wisconsin court. This is video per WEAU. The woman whose car Paul allegedly broke into at Costco addressed the court.
Well over a year ago, I went on just 2 dates with this man, and now my entire life has been turned upside down. Everything changed in April when I found a woman, who now I know to be Andrea Whitaker, rummaging around in my garage. I felt scared and uneasy. And when Paul broke into my car and tried to poison me on May 15th, the fear became real.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Police believe Andrea Whitaker broke into the woman's garage in April before she allegedly conspired with Paul to kill that woman. Here's what the prosecution said during that hearing.
The amount of poisons and toxins that were found in Mr. Van Duyne's multiple residences, the residence of his co-defendant, in his vehicle, is shocking. We're talking about substances that are so toxic that multiple agents had to be hospitalized for coming in contact with them.
Paul's attorney also made a statement, and in doing so, with Paul by his side, he might have tipped his hand or gave us a glimpse into how he may defend Paul if this goes to trial.
It appears that Mr. Van Duyne's relationship with Ms. Whitaker was destabilizing here. Second, at Ms. Whitaker's probable cause hearing on Wednesday, the state said, quote, "I think Ms. Whitaker's involvement is absolutely clear and that she is likely the brains of the operation."
It appears the couple that allegedly tried to erase people who Paul previously dated may point the finger at each other, or at least Paul pointing the finger at Andrea as the ringleader if this case goes to trial. Paul's bond is at $10 million and Andrea's bond is at $4 million. Joining me now is Mary Jumbelik, forensic pathologist and former chief medical examiner. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I will admit I am not a science person. It was not one of my better subjects in school. But these chemicals that this couple allegedly was using, they sound pretty dangerous. What stood out to you?
Well, they're all 3 very, very toxic. And in my experience, because I'm a forensic pathologist, I've seen mostly people that are deceased from poisonings. So cyanide is extremely dangerous, hard to get a hold of. It is present in certain industries, and if you have the knowledge of ordering it or finding it out, certainly I've seen 6 or 7 cases of cyanide poisoning in my career. Thallium is more an old-fashioned poison, really. Used to be used back in the day when it was more easy to obtain, but nowadays it's more regulated, harder to get. Also toxic, but has a delayed onset. And then abrin is as dangerous as like ricin, if not more so. And so that also is hard to get a hold of, and hard to process it to be a lethal substance. So they're very serious poisons.
And even in this case, because in the water bottles in both victims, where there was thallium and cyanide, they talk about taking a sip or a gulp, then spitting it out or throwing up. I mean, that type of how much exposure do you actually need to cyanide for it to be fatal?
Well, cyanide gas is very lethal in a very small amount. I've gotten sick when I've done victims of cyanide poisoning when I've smelled the gastric contents, because the stomach acid will release the hydrogen cyanide gas. And I've felt sick and had to leave the room before I even realized it was a cyanide case. But in terms of like the sodium and potassium cyanide salts that are put into the water, dissolved into the water, it would depend on how much was put in. So I don't know. I'm sure that the forensic toxicologists are testing the water for whatever the concentration was and so forth. The person who took the sip of water is very lucky, because once you drink that and it hits the stomach acid, that's when the gas is released and very toxic.
Andrea Whitaker is a pharmacy student, and Paul Van Duyne is a mechanical engineer. So these, definitely the pharmacy student part of it. What type of access do you have as a pharmacy student where they could have gotten these chemicals if it's not something that you could go get at a pharmacy or even like CVS or something like that?
I'm not sure about the pharmacologic training that these pharmacy students get, or even what access, but in the forensic world, it's a very controlled type of substance. So even though I had to be familiar with it in my training as a medical examiner, it's under lock and key in the toxicology lab as a control. You have to have special license to get it. So, but as we know, criminals in all manner find their way around it. So I don't know, but it's usually kept under extreme lock and key.
Yeah, that's interesting to think of where they may have been able to get it. Because they even at one point were texting about making thallium. Is that how I say it?
Thallium.
Thallium.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? And then is that something that they potentially would have been able to make at home? Because that was the one that was banned because it was extremely toxic, because it used to be used in like rat poison. Is that right?
Right. It's very toxic to the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and you can get, tingling and you can't walk straight, and then, more severe symptoms from there. But it's present in, like you said, pesticide rodenticides, but also present, in metal industry. So, I don't know. The investigative part of how you illegally obtain poisons is less familiar to me than what they do to the human body. And thallium is bad. That's a little bit more delayed poisoning. So if you want to kill someone and, remove yourself from the situation, that may take days, hours to days to have an effect. Whereas cyanide can be very quick.
And then there's abrin. And I've probably butchered some of these. I admit some of these science names, but he was found. Paul Van Duyne, according to the criminal complaint, that he had rosary peas with him.
Mm-hmm.
How are those Because that's what you need to make abrin. Is that
Right. Well, the poison's inside the little pea. Okay, so you have to extract that, presumably using some, chemical technique. But if you just took the pea, you swallowed it, and it passed out the other side, it wouldn't have an effect. It would have to be extracted from the pea itself.
But that would be in terms of evidence presented that he was the one to put the abrin in somebody's car. In the science world, having rosary peas is almost a smoking gun.
Sure, and it's very, very toxic at really a minute concentration.
What does abrin, because that was put in some of these cars, both cars that they tried to put into the vents. How would that, allegedly, what does that do to the body?
Well, it like many poisons, it will cause a severe GI upset. So you might vomit and have nausea, have diarrhea, bloody diarrhea. It ultimately inhibits protein synthesis so that your body goes into multi-organ failure. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys all shut down.
Wow. And then I'm trying to find hydrogen sulfide was a gas. I believe it's a gas, right? That was found in they said a plastic tote that was in the back of the vehicle of the first woman who had to go to the hospital. And that can be fatal. What do you take away from that part of the story?
Well, hydrogen cyanide is a gas, and it can be formed when sodium cyanide or potassium cyanide mix with moisture or an acidic compound like stomach acid or like water, and it dissipates kind of quickly. So the fact that it's present there, they'll have to figure out the timeline of when those the salts were dissolved or put there. I have had people, dead within seconds of being exposed to hydrogen cyanide. So,
Wow.
Presumably the concentration was much lower, and there's also, it wasn't maybe a direct inhalation. It was in the air, but, kind of indirect.
And I know you talked about that you've had cases where you've gotten sick just being exposed to what somebody else was exposed to. At the bond hearing for Paul Van Duyne, the prosecutor said that there were federal agents that had to be hospitalized because they were exposed in serving search warrants. What does that tell you about just the power of the chemicals that this couple allegedly had?
Yes, cyanide's a very bad actor, and not everyone can smell it. So you have a genetic ability to smell hydrogen cyanide or not. So you can be exposed to it, and if you can't smell it, you don't understand you've been exposed. Where I trained in Chicago, we had a policy to always have someone working on the case that could smell hydrogen cyanide. Because if you recall the Tylenol poisonings that occurred there many years ago. And so it's important to know whether you can or can't smell it as an investigator, I think, because as soon as you detect something, you need to get out of the situation and suit up appropriately so that you're not exposing yourself.
And then just lastly, Mary, because you've worked so many cases, you've seen poisonings before. Fortunately, both of these women didn't lose their lives because of what this couple allegedly did. Just what was going through your head as you read through the 16 pages of this criminal complaint and you just saw one chemical after another, and then how this couple apparently, what their intent was, according to prosecutors, to try to take out these two women?
Well, I mean, certainly it's for the court to decide the veracity of the information and the investigation, but taken at face value, it seems like it was a elaborate, plot to ensure that if one thing didn't work, the other thing would work, and then another thing, so that, it's coming from a multi-pronged attack on the poisoning. It's not, it obviously keen on their intent being met.
And it seems prosecutors have been able to connect the dots in terms of what you found inside of these victims, but then also the chemicals they had. for me, the doesn't get much more damning than having those vials inside a bag that your name, your last name was written on, like they do in Paul Van Duyne's case. Mary Jim Bellick, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. I certainly learned a lot in the 10 minutes we've had together. So thank you for that, and we'll see how this case continues on.
Yes, thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.